There are places in a war where you are not supposed to be alone. Places where you can feel the map ending under your feet, where the lines drawn by officers turn to empty space and guesswork. Places where the land belongs to no one except whoever is desperate enough to cross it. You ended up there by accident. Your squad had been pushing forward along a riverbank, using the reeds for cover. The enemy line was thin in that sector, or so someone claimed. The artillery was meant to land far ahead, clearing a path. Instead, it landed exactly where you were walking. The first blast knocked you off your feet. The second dropped half the squad. The third separated you from everyone who was still alive. You tried to crawl back, but the ground had turned into an angry machine. Explosions, shrapnel, bullets looking for whatever moved. So you crawled sideways toward a thicket of trees, trying not to think about who else was crawling and who wasn't anymore. By the time the shelling stopped, the world had changed shape. Smoke drifted low over the river, mingling with fog. The reeds were flattened, the water dark with soot. Voices were gone, gunfire was distant. You waited, breathing through your coat sleeve, listening for anything familiar. Nothing. No squad, no shouts, no orders. Just the wind and the slow hiss of steam rising off a crater filled with burning roots. You pushed yourself onto your elbows and scanned the edge of the trees. The brush was thick enough to hide in, but it also blocked your view. The river behind you was too exposed. There was only one direction left: forward, deeper into the woods, deeper into somewhere you absolutely were not supposed to be. You started walking. At first you followed instinct, straight lines, cautious steps, ears tuned to anything that didn't belong. But instinct fades fast when you're tired, hungry, and alone. Soon it wasn't instinct carrying you, it was something more primitive. Refusal. A refusal to lie down, a refusal to panic, a refusal to stay where the next shell might find you. You moved in silence. Branches snapped softly under your boots, birds scattered. The cold bit through your jacket as the day crawled into afternoon, then into something darker. You stopped when you found the clearing. It had once been a logging campsite. You recognized the layout: rough-cut stumps, abandoned tools, a fire pit filled with half-burned timber. Someone had left in a hurry. There were footprints, but too many to read. A torn tarp flapped weakly in the breeze, caught between two birches like a flag of surrender. You crossed the clearing slowly, scanning the tree line. No movement. You crouched beside the fire pit, brushing ashes aside with a stick. Underneath was something strange. Warmth. Faint, but real. Someone had been here not long ago. Friendly or enemy, that was the question. A branch cracked behind you. You froze. Your hand tightened on your rifle, breath caught in your throat. The sound was close, too deliberate to be an animal, too soft to be confident. You waited. Nothing. You backed toward a fallen log and used it as cover, peeking over the top. The forest stared back. A minute passed, then another. Only the wind moved. You exhaled slowly. The branch might have been just that, a branch. Or maybe someone was watching you the same way you were watching the trees. You didn't have the luxury to find out. Not alone. Not here. You pressed on. The woods grew denser, the ground uneven and covered in roots that tried to trip you. Once you slipped on a patch of wet moss and slid halfway down a ditch, catching yourself on a broken root. Mud soaked your sleeves. Your rifle banged against a rock. You cursed under your breath and climbed out carefully. By dusk, you were exhausted. The forest, quiet earlier, had begun to mutter. Distant creaks, shifting branches, animals you couldn't see moving through brush. But the worst sound was the one you didn't hear: the front. It had faded entirely, swallowed by distance. You had crossed the line without realizing it. You weren't behind your squad anymore. You were behind theirs. You found shelter by accident, an overturned supply wagon lying on its side near a ditch. Wheels shattered, axle cracked. Whatever it carried was long gone, but the frame formed a half cave against the wind, and that was enough. You crawled inside. The night was colder than you expected. You curled your coat tighter, listening to the woods settle. Once something passed nearby, slow, heavy steps crunching leaves. You held your breath and kept your hand on your rifle. The footsteps faded. You let your breath out quietly. You slept in fragments. A noise woke you, soft at first, then clearer. Metal being handled. Not close, but not far either. You crawled toward the wagon's edge and peered out. Through the trees, faint glimmers of firelight. Voices, foreign ones. You swallowed. The enemy had made camp not 200 yards from where you'd chosen to hide. You considered running, but running made noise. Noise attracted attention. Attention killed men who were alone. You stayed exactly where you were, barely breathing, until their voices softened, then drifted into the low murmur soldiers use when settling down for the night. You caught fragments of sentences you didn't understand, the clatter of equipment being arranged, the sound of someone sharpening a blade. You didn't sleep again. When dawn broke, pale and sickly, you crawled out from under the wagon and moved in the opposite direction of their camp. You followed animal paths, stepping only where the moss looked thick and the twigs seemed unlikely to break. Every minute felt borrowed. Around midday, you reached a ridge. From the top, you finally saw something human. Not the enemy camp, not the forest, not the wilderness. Smoke rising in thin lines from chimneys. A cluster of houses. A village. Dangerous. Maybe occupied. Maybe abandoned. But shelter. Food. Possibly friendlies. You descended carefully. As you neared the outskirts, you felt the weight of eyes on the back of your neck. Not enemy soldiers, not scouts, villagers, cautious, hidden behind curtains and boarded windows, unsure what uniform you wore under the grime. A door opened a crack. A woman's voice spoke a language you didn't know. A child peeked from behind her skirt. You held your empty hands up. "I'm not here to hurt you," you said, but you knew the words meant nothing. She didn't run. She didn't smile. She just looked at you for a long, tense moment, then motioned for you to follow her inside. Inside the house, the heat hit you first. Real heat from a stove still burning, the smell of bread, the clatter of crockery, a small table, 2 chairs, a lamp, the quiet pulse of a life not entirely erased by war. The woman gave you water, then bread. Then she pointed toward your boots, torn, soaked, covered in mud, and shook her head. You tried to speak, but she pressed a finger to her lips. Footsteps outside. More than one pair. You grabbed your rifle. She grabbed your wrist and forced it down. "Soldaten," she whispered.
"Enemy. A patrol." You looked at the back door. She shook her head. "Too noisy." You looked at the window. "Too exposed." You looked at the stove. "Too hot." Then she pointed under the floorboards. You blinked. She knelt quickly and lifted a loose plank. Beneath was a pit no bigger than a dog kennel, barely enough for a man. You squeezed inside. She lowered the plank. Darkness swallowed you. Bootsteps entered the house. Voices, questions. Her replies, short, calm, convincing. One voice lingered too long. A man walked near the plank above you. Dust drifted onto your face. You didn't dare move. Finally, they left. She opened the floor and helped you out. You whispered thank you, hoping the meaning carried. She nodded toward the door. Go. And you did. By dusk, you reached friendly lines, a forward patrol, rifles leveled until they recognized the cut of your coat. "Where the hell did you come from?" one asked. You pointed back into the forest. "Too far," you said. They took you in, handed you water, a blanket, a place to sit. But even surrounded by your own again, a part of you stayed in that forest, under that wagon, in that cramped hole beneath the woman's floor. Some places you walk through. Some places walk through you. And if you ever end up alone beyond the line, you learn something no training manual ever teaches. Silence is louder than gunfire. And survival isn't just living, it's refusing to disappear.